You know, they say temptation doesn't always come dressed in red. Sometimes it looks like family. Like someone who shares your dinner table, laughs at the same jokes, calls your husband uncle. Someone who shouldn't even cross your mind in that way, but somehow does. I wish I could sit here and tell you this story has a clean ending. That I never crossed the line, that I held on to my vows like a life raft in stormy water. But if I did that, if I lied to you like I've been lying to myself, then what's the point of telling the story at all? Because the truth is, it happened, and I still don't know how to live with it. It started so innocently. A family visit. My husband's nephew coming to stay with us for the summer. Jason, 22. Bright smile, respectful, charming in that quiet, grown boy kind of way. You know the type, mature enough to carry a real conversation, but young enough to still look at you like you matter. Like you're seen. Like you're alive. And God help me, I hadn't felt that in so long. Our house was warm, filled with golden light from the summer sun. But inside me, it was cold. David, my husband, he'd stopped seeing me years ago. Not in the dramatic, fighting all the time kind of way. Worse. In the quiet kind of way. The kind of invisibility that creeps up slowly. So slowly you barely notice it happening, until one day you look in the mirror and think, who am I even dressing for anymore? So when Jason looked at me with those soft, curious eyes, when he lingered just a little longer during our conversations, when he asked questions my own husband stopped caring to ask, I ignored the flutter in my stomach. I called it silly. Harmless. I told myself it's just nice to feel noticed. But it wasn't harmless. And it wasn't silly. It was the beginning of something I never saw coming, not like this. Because here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. It's not always loud. It doesn't always show up with lipstick on a collar or a late-night phone call. Sometimes it's a slow burn. A soft touch. A quiet moment that stretches just 1 second too long. And before you know it, you're in too deep to pull yourself out. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And now, there's no going back. This is the story of how I crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. With someone I never should have even looked at that way. This is the story I haven't told anyone. Not my best friend. Not my therapist. Not even myself until now. So, if you're ready to step into the gray space between right and wrong, if you've ever felt unseen, forgotten, or tempted to reach for something just to remember what it feels like to be wanted, then sit with me. Hear me out. Because this isn't just about what happened. It's about why it happened. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because what you're about to hear may change the way you see loyalty, love, and betrayal forever. David barely noticed when Jason arrived. He didn't even come to the door. Just called out from his office, something like, tell him to make himself at home. That was it. So I did. I showed Jason the guest room, offered him something to drink, asked about school, work, life. And he answered, with real words. Real interest. Not just nods or distracted MHMs like I got from David. It was strange how quickly the house felt different just by having someone new in it. Someone who actually looked me in the eye when I spoke. Jason was 22, but he carried himself like he was older. Not in a jaded way, just thoughtful. He was the kind of person who noticed things most people overlook. And not just big things. He noticed when I changed my hair, when I switched from tea to coffee in the mornings, even when I wore the bracelet I hadn't worn in years. That first week, I chalked it all up to basic politeness. He was just being kind, respectful. But even then, I felt it, that quiet hum under the surface. The way he lingered in the kitchen a little longer than necessary. How he always found a way to help, to stay near, to talk to me when David wasn't around. And David was almost never around. He worked long hours, even longer weekends. When he was home, he was glued to his phone, buried in emails, zoned out in front of the TV. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. Our marriage wasn't broken in a dramatic way. It was just empty. Like two strangers sharing a house and pretending it still meant something. I used to be vibrant. I used to laugh without thinking, sing while cooking, dance barefoot in the living room. But somewhere along the way, that version of me disappeared, replaced by someone quieter, smaller, someone who moved through each day like it was a checklist. Wake up, clean, cook, try to be needed. But Jason, he disrupted that rhythm. He made me feel like a person again, not just someone filling space. One afternoon, we sat on the back patio, just the two of us. The sunlight poured through the trees, and everything looked soft and golden. I asked him how he'd really been. And he opened up, told me about how hard college had been this year, how he didn't know what came next, how sometimes he felt like he was just floating through life without a map. And I looked at him, and I understood. Because I felt the exact same way. It wasn't flirtation. Not yet. It was connection. A slow, quiet bond that snuck in when neither of us were looking. Still, I remember that moment clear as day, the way his eyes held mine a beat too long. The way I didn't look away. The way my heart ticked just a little faster. I should have shut it down right then. But I didn't. Because for the first time in months, I felt seen. Not glanced at, not brushed over. Seen. David didn't ask how my day went. Jason did. David didn't notice when I looked tired. Jason did. David didn't even realize I had stopped saying goodnight. Jason noticed when I was up late, sitting alone in the kitchen. It wasn't physical. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was dangerous. And deep down, I think we both knew that, even if neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Looking back now, that was the beginning. Not the night it all went too far. Not the kiss. Not the aftermath. No. The beginning was that quiet moment in the golden light when a married woman and her husband's nephew looked at each other and felt something they weren't supposed to feel. And neither one of us turned away. It happened on one of those scorching summer afternoons, the kind where the air feels heavy and everything moves slower. I had just come back from the store, arms full of bags, keys nearly slipping from my fingers. David wasn't home. He never was these days. I didn't even expect help anymore. But Jason was there. He rushed out to the driveway, took the bags from my hands without a word, flashed me a smile that felt warm. Not polite. Warm. Like he was happy to see me. Inside, I started unpacking groceries, and he stayed. Asked if I needed help putting things away. I said yes. And I don't know if it was the heat or the quiet or the closeness, but that kitchen felt smaller than usual. We moved around each other, bumping shoulders here and there, reaching for the same shelf, laughing about how we kept getting in each other's way. And then he said something, I don't even remember what, but it made me laugh. Really laugh. The kind that bubbles up without warning, the kind I hadn't heard come out of my own mouth in I don't even know how long. And then he looked at me. Not like a boy looking at his uncle's wife. Not like a nephew. He looked at me like a man. Like I was a woman. It wasn't a full-on stare. Just a moment. But long enough to feel it settle in the air between us. I didn't say anything. Just kept putting away cans, pretending not to notice that he wasn't reaching for the pantry anymore. He was watching me. That night, the house was quiet. David was asleep in his usual spot on the far edge of the bed, face turned toward the wall, phone still glowing in his hand. I couldn't sleep. I walked to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. Jason was there. In the hallway. Coming from the bathroom, shirtless, towels slung over his shoulder. I tried to step aside, but we brushed past each other in the narrow space. His skin was warm. My breath caught. And then it happened. That look. That second. Our eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't planned. It wasn't flirtation. It was something else. Something electric and terrifying and real. He didn't say anything. I didn't either. But neither of us moved. Not right away. That second stretched out, too long to call it innocent. Too short to do anything about it. And then, just like that, he walked past me. Back to his room. Door closing softly behind him. I stood there alone in the hallway, heart pounding like I'd run a mile. Glass still in my hand. No water. It was just a moment, but something shifted. I felt it. I saw it in his eyes. And worse, I didn't look away. I should have told David. Should have drawn a line, made it clear, set a boundary, whatever grown, married women are supposed to do when a dangerous line starts to blur. But what I did instead, well, that's where everything began to unravel. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment. A slip. A misunderstanding. I told myself I imagined the way he looked at me. That it wasn't real. That I was tired. That I was lonely and making things up. But the lie didn't sit right. Because deep down, I knew what I felt. And I knew what I saw in his eyes. Still, I tried to push it aside. Went through the motions, laundry, dishes, emails, errands. But that look, it stayed with me. It followed me into every room, every conversation, every quiet hour of the day. And I hated myself for how much I thought about it. For how much I wanted to feel that again. Just to be seen. That afternoon, I stood in front of my closet longer than usual. I reached for a dress I hadn't worn in years, something light, something that hugged me in the right places. Nothing outrageous. Just different. And I sprayed perfume. Not the one I wore for David, the other one. The one I used to wear back when I still cared how I smelled walking into a room. I told myself it was just to feel better. To feel like me again. Not for Jason. Definitely not for Jason. But that was a lie too, wasn't it? The guilt came in waves. Like sudden gusts of wind that knocked the breath out of me. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but why did it feel like I already had? Why did his gaze make me feel wanted? And was it really so wrong to want that? To need it? David didn't notice the dress. Didn't comment on the perfume. Didn't ask me why I was humming while I cleaned the living room that day. But Jason noticed. He noticed everything. You look really nice today, he said, walking past me as I wiped the counter. Soft voice. Not flirtatious. But intentional. I smiled and pretended it meant nothing. But inside, I lit up in a way I hadn't in so long. And then the questions started swirling in my mind, the ones I didn't have answers for. What did this mean? Was it innocent? Was it dangerous? Why was I seeking out the sound of his footsteps? Why did I time my coffee breaks to match his? Why did I pause in the hallway longer than I needed to, just to catch a glimpse of him reading on the couch? What kind of woman did that make me? I told myself it was harmless. A crush. A fantasy. It would pass. But then he said something else. A few days later, I was in the kitchen again. Funny how everything always happened in that kitchen. I dropped a glass. Startled, frustrated. He rushed in, knelt beside me to help pick up the pieces. You shouldn't have to clean up everything around here alone, he said. And I froze. It was nothing and yet, everything. That simple sentence sat in my chest like a secret. Because no one had said that to me in years. Not even David. Especially not David. After that, I became aware of everything. I started lingering in places I knew Jason might be, the backyard, the hallway, the porch in the late evening when the sky turned orange and soft. We didn't talk much during those moments. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. But the silence between us? It wasn't empty. It was full of something I couldn't name. Something I didn't want to name. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. That I wasn't waiting to hear his footsteps. That I wasn't disappointed when they didn't come. I'd sit beside David during dinner, listen to him mumble about work, and wonder how we'd become so distant, so numb. I tried to remember the last time he reached for my hand under the table, the last time he looked at me like I mattered. I couldn't. And in the silence between us, Jason's compliments echoed louder. His presence grew heavier. My thoughts became harder to silence. I was walking a tightrope balancing between guilt and longing, duty and desire. What I was supposed to be, and what I secretly wanted to become, even if just for a moment. And the scariest part? I didn't want to stop. I knew the line was there, clear, sharp, bright. But part of me was already stepping over it. Things didn't explode all at once. They unraveled quietly, like thread slipping from a sweater. One small tug at a time. Jason started helping more around the house. Little things. Taking the trash out before I even asked. Folding the laundry I forgot in the dryer. wiping down the kitchen counters while I cooked. At first, I tried to tell him it wasn't necessary. He'd just smile and say, "It's the least I can do." But every time he stepped in, I felt something shift, something I wasn't ready to admit out loud. And then there was this one afternoon. I was washing dishes. Jason was drying them. It was quiet. Just the sound of water, our hands moving in rhythm. I passed him a dish towel. He reached for it, and somehow, our hands touched just for a moment, but long enough to feel the heat between our fingers. Neither of us pulled away. I looked up. He looked at me. We didn't speak, but the air between us said enough. Later that same week, we found ourselves talking more, longer conversations, deeper ones. He asked about my childhood, my dreams, what I thought I'd be doing at this age. No one had asked me that in years. And I listened to him, too. His worries, his confusion about his future, his fear of ending up in a life that didn't feel like his own. I felt it all, because I was already living that life. And then, he said it. "You deserve more than this, you know." It was quiet, soft, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it landed in my chest like a punch. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just nodded, eyes burning, lips pressed tight to keep everything inside from spilling out. That night, I poured 2 glasses of wine. Not for celebration. Not for company. Just because I needed to feel something. Jason was on the back patio, staring at the stars. It was late, warm, the kind of night where the air wraps around you like a blanket. I walked out and handed him a glass. He smiled, a little surprised. We didn't talk much. We just sat there, side by side, listening to the quiet hum of the night. The stars above us felt endless. And I realized how small my world had become inside that house. Routine, distance, silence. But this was alive. This felt like a beginning and an ending. He turned toward me. I could feel his gaze before I saw it. It was that same look, the one that held 1,000 questions, and one answer we were both too afraid to speak. Our faces were close. Close enough to feel his breath. And in that moment, I leaned in. Just slightly. Not enough to cross the line, but far enough to know I wanted to. And then, my phone rang. David. I froze. The screen lit up with his name, and suddenly everything felt cold again. I answered. My voice was calm. My heart wasn't. He asked if I'd remembered to confirm the plumber for the weekend. That was it. That was all. I said yes, hung up, and sat there in silence. Jason didn't say a word. He just stared out at the stars again. We both knew what almost happened. And worse, we both knew it wasn't the last time it would almost happen. I told myself it was just emotional. That I was still in control. That I was strong enough to stop whatever this was from going further. But the truth? I was already gone. It happened on a Thursday. David had left early that morning for a 2-day work trip, some conference out of state. He kissed my cheek on the way out, barely a whisper of contact. No eye contact. No warmth. Just obligation. The house was quiet by nightfall. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts loud and clear, every ache, every hollow space, every longing you've buried for far too long. I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too big. The sheets too cold. I got up, wrapped a robe around me, and wandered to the kitchen for tea, a small act of distraction. And then I heard footsteps. Jason. He walked in, half asleep, shirtless, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to shake off a dream. Couldn't sleep, he said, voice low, tired. I nodded. Neither could I. He moved around me, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. But the air between us, it was different. Tense. Heavy. Unspoken. I turned away, tried to busy myself with the kettle, but I could feel him watching me. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded again, still not looking at him. But then he stepped closer. You don't have to pretend around me, you know. And something inside me cracked. I looked at him, really looked, his face open, concerned, present. And I broke. The words poured out, quiet at first, then messy and raw. How I felt invisible. How I missed being touched, being loved, being wanted. How tired I was of pretending everything was fine when nothing was. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. Just stood there. Close enough to feel real. Close enough to feel like something I needed. "I see you," he whispered. And that was it. The kiss wasn't planned. I didn't think. I just leaned forward. He met me halfway. Soft at first. Then deeper. Desperate. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't careful. It was all the loneliness, all the silence, all the years of being untouched crashing forward in a single moment. My robe slipped off one shoulder. His hands found my waist. And still, we didn't stop. I didn't want to stop. There was no past in that moment. No future. Only that night, that hunger, that terrifying, electrifying sense of finally being wanted. We didn't make it to the bedroom. It happened right there, against the kitchen counter, beneath the soft hum of the fridge, in the dim glow of a single overhead light. When it was over, he just stood there, breathing hard, his eyes wide with something between awe and fear. I pulled the robe tighter around me, turned away, and sat down at the table. The shame hit fast. Like a wave I didn't see coming. It crashed over me, pulled me under. I sobbed. Quietly at first, then harder. The kind of crying that comes from someplace deep. A part of me I didn't know still had tears left. Jason didn't say anything. He just stood there, stunned. Not moving. Not knowing what to do. And, honestly, neither did I. In that moment, I wasn't a wife. I wasn't even myself. I was just someone starved for affection, clinging to the first hand that reached back. And now, I'd done the unthinkable. But what came after, that's where things got truly complicated. The morning after, the house felt different. Not louder. Not messier. Just heavier. Jason came into the kitchen while I was making coffee. We didn't say much, just exchanged a quiet, "Good morning." He didn't look at me. Didn't smile like he usually did. His eyes stayed on the floor, on the table, anywhere but on mine. I tried to act normal. Poured his coffee like I always did. Asked if he slept okay. He just nodded, took the cup, and left. That nod cut deeper than it should have. The silence between us now, it wasn't warm, or full, or charged. It was cold. Awkward. Unspoken regret filling every room we walked through. I told myself we needed space. That it was just the weight of what happened. That things would settle. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. We'd opened a door neither of us were ready to walk through, and now we were stuck in the hallway, not knowing which way to turn. Later that day, David came home. He walked in, dropped his bag at the door, and gave me the same half-hearted kiss on the cheek. He didn't notice anything. Didn't notice the tightness in my voice or the way I couldn't meet his eyes. Didn't notice how Jason barely said 2 words to him at dinner. Didn't notice me flinching when his hand brushed mine by accident. But I noticed everything. I noticed how quiet Jason had become. How he kept finding reasons to leave the room when I entered. How he barely spoke during meals, avoided being alone with me, and kept his eyes glued to his phone. He was shutting down. And I was unraveling. My chest stayed tight for days. Every sound, every whisper, every footstep made my stomach twist. I couldn't stop imagining David finding out. A text left open. A glance exchanged. A word spoken in the wrong tone. Anything could unravel everything. And what if Jason said something? Was he angry? Did he regret it? Did he blame me? He was young. He had nothing to lose. I had everything. I started checking my phone constantly, rereading old messages between us, looking for signs, for tone, for evidence. Deleting pictures, clearing search history, scrubbing the digital trail we'd barely left behind. At night, I lay in bed beside David, stiff as stone, while he scrolled through emails and news articles, utterly unaware that the woman next to him was falling apart inside. And I kept thinking, was Jason going to tell? Was I? The guilt was a steady drumbeat in my head. But so was the fear. I'd crossed a line. Not just emotionally. Not just mentally. Physically. Fully. There was no undoing what had happened. No rewinding, no pretending. And now, everything felt fragile. My marriage, my home, my mind. I was anxious, jumpy, short-tempered. I snapped at David over little things, dirty dishes, late nights, missed calls. Things I used to ignore now sent me spiraling, because I couldn't say what was really wrong. I couldn't shout, "I slept with your nephew and now I don't know who I am." So I swallowed it, buried it, let it fester. And Jason? He kept his distance. Polite, careful, but never the same. The closeness we'd once shared had turned into a wall I couldn't climb. And maybe that was the punishment I deserved. But the worst part wasn't what we did. It was what came after. The silence. The distance. The waiting. Waiting to see if the truth would catch up to me. Waiting to see who would break first. Waiting to see if we'd pretend forever, or if everything was about to come crashing down. A few days later, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at an old photo on the wall. It was one of those big family pictures we'd taken years ago at David's parents' lake house. Everyone smiling, arms around each other, sun in our eyes. There was Jason. Small, maybe 10 years old. Gap-toothed, hair sticking up in every direction, freckles across his nose. He was standing right next to me in the photo, grinning, clinging to my side like he used to when he was younger and didn't know any better. Back when he called me Auntie in that squeaky voice. Back when I braided his hair once as a joke, and he wore it proudly until his dad made him take it out. Back when I saw him as a child. As family. As someone I was meant to protect. I sank to the floor, that frame still in my hands, and everything hit me at once. The shame. The regret. The confusion. I didn't recognize myself anymore. Not the woman in the photo, smiling like she had it all together. Not the woman who had once believed in things like boundaries, trust, and loyalty. I wanted love, not lust. I wanted connection, not this chaos I'd created, this swirling, breathless mess that kept me up at night and made me jump at every phone vibration. But maybe I mistook one for the other. Maybe in my hunger for warmth, I let the first spark I found burn down everything I thought I was. I picked up a notebook later that evening, sat in the living room with the lights low and the curtains drawn. And I wrote. Not a confession. Not really. It started as a letter to Jason. Then halfway through, it became a letter to David. By the end, I realized I was really writing to myself. I wrote about feeling invisible, about wanting to be wanted, about the guilt that crawled under my skin and settled in my bones, about how I knew what I'd done and still didn't know why I let it happen. I wrote that I missed being touched. Not just physically, but emotionally. I missed being asked how my day was. Missed being looked at like I was someone. I didn't sign it. Didn't address it. Didn't seal it. I tucked it between the pages of an old cookbook I hadn't opened in years. And I left it there. Because the truth is, I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to let those words be seen. Not by Jason. Not by David. Maybe not even by me again. I thought about coming clean. Telling David. Laying it all out and letting the pieces fall where they may. But what would that fix? Would it be honesty or destruction? Would it be healing or just another wound? I didn't know. I still don't. All I know is that the silence is getting heavier. And the version of me I used to be, she feels so far away now. Every time I pass by that hallway photo, I wonder if Jason's avoiding it too. If he sees it when he walks by. If it stings him like it stings me. We haven't spoken about that night. Not once. Not even a glance to acknowledge it. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all, the way something so intimate can be buried in silence like it never even happened. Like it was nothing. But it was something. And no matter how deeply I try to bury it, I carry it with me. Every single day. I know what I did was wrong. I won't try to dress it up or make excuses. But I also know I wasn't the only one lost in that house. We were all drifting. All disconnected. All carrying silence like it was easier than truth. I didn't wake up one day planning to betray anyone. It happened in the quiet. In the cracks. In the spaces where love had once lived and then slowly faded away. And now I sit here with this weight. A secret that eats at me. A memory I can't shake. A question that won't let me rest. Do I confess? Do I open the door and let the storm in, knowing full well it might tear everything apart? Or do I carry this, quietly alone, for the sake of what we built, for the sake of what's left? If you've ever been in a place like this, where love and guilt collide, where your heart tells one truth and your conscience tells another, I want to know. What would you have done? Would you have stopped yourself in time? Would you have said something after? Would you have told the truth? Or would you have buried it deep and prayed it stayed hidden? Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Even if it's messy. Even if it hurts. Because sometimes, the most broken truths are the ones we need to hear the most. And if this story touched something in you, if you felt seen, or called out, or even just understood, then don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because this is what we do here. We tell the stories people are too afraid to say out loud, the ones that hide in the corners of marriages, in the silences between words, in the spaces we don't want anyone to look. Some mistakes are loud. They explode. They burn bridges. They scream. Others, they echo in silence for years. They sit with you at the dinner table. They crawl into bed with you at night. They ride beside you in the car, quiet, but always there. I don't know what the future holds for me and Jason. Or for David. Or for the version of me that used to know exactly who she was. But I've learned something. When you ignore your emptiness long enough, it finds a way to fill itself. With anything it can. Even if that anything breaks you later. I wanted love. I settled for being noticed. And in the process, I lost a piece of myself I may never fully get back. So if you're listening, really listening, and there's someone in your life who's fading into the background, see them. Not just with your eyes, but with your heart. Because sometimes, the ones who feel invisible are the ones you should have seen all along.